Hello and welcome back. So it was brought to my attention that I missed a particularly interesting case, a murder mystery in Missouri, and I wanted to go ahead and dedicate a video solely to that because when I dove into it, there's a lot of information and I felt it deserves its own video. So let's get into it. The body was found naked and decomposing. The hands and feet were severed and missing. The teeth and lower jaw had been completely removed. In April 1989, Ronnie Allen Johnson, age 26, was discovered mutilated in the Mark Twain National Forest, not far from West Plains. He had been shot in the head. That was the determined cause of death, which, no matter how bad a person is, in my opinion, unless there's a child involved, no matter how bad a person is, I don't think that people should, someone should suffer and have their hands and their feet removed while they're alive, or their teeth and jaw removed while they're alive. So, in a way, it was a bit of a mercy before the brutality. No one has been brought to justice. No one has been charged. Some speak of what's called the Dark Code of the Ozarks, which is pretty much don't ask, don't tell. You know nothing, you saw nothing, zip it or the same might happen to you. That's what I've gathered. Some believe that the killer is dead, others believe that the killer is obviously not dead, and maybe that the mutilation was sent as a message for snitching. So we'll get more into that. Ronnie Johnson of West Plains was 26 years old when he was murdered in April 1989. No one has ever been charged, as I said. Quote, "There are long memories here," end quote, said Frank Martin III, who was managing editor and publisher of the West Plains Daily Quill at the time that Johnson went missing. Quote, "This is the kind of thing that could still get somebody killed all these years later," Mr. Martin III stated. That might sound a little melodramatic, but it's not. You just have to live here. Here he speaks of is a land of hard scrabble poverty and natural beauty. The National Forest where the body was found spans 1.5 million acres, an area the size of Delaware. Here, night falls fast behind tall trees, streams, and unmarked forest roads creasing the deep woods. In the past, Martin says, people grew so much marijuana in the Ozark woods of Howell County that according to one agricultural study, weed was one of the county's largest cash crops. This was long before it would become legal to be grown. In 1989, someone thought the National Forest was a perfect place to leave a body, the body of Ronnie Johnson. Martin's newspaper ran stories about the discovery. One day when he was home, the phone rang and he picked it up. It was a man on the other line who threatened to off him if he and his newspaper didn't back off. So why was it so difficult to identify the body? According to police reports, 2 turkey hunters discovered the body on the morning of April 26, 1989. They telephoned law enforcement from a store in nearby Pumpkin Center. But even that is murky. A woman now living in Joplin has told the newsletter she was in the woods with someone who found the body the day prior. Her version of events is detailed in an accompanying story. It didn't take long before someone else called the Daily Quill. Martin remembers that day. Quote, "My editor had already sent out the only reporter who was in the newsroom at the time, and he was more suited to movie reviews." End quote. Martin arrived at the scene south of Noblet Lake and near the old Horton Cemetery. In fact, he helped move Johnson's body onto a stretcher. A photo of Martin assisting law enforcement ran in his paper. Martin has roots in West Plains. His family was one of 3 that owned the paper. He had worked with law enforcement as a photographer. He occasionally snapped crime scene photos for the Missouri State Highway Patrol. "I have a strong stomach," he stated. He took photos of the dismembered body that day. Some newspaper accounts say Johnson's downstairs also had been severed, but Martin doubts that. He thinks it's more likely, and this is gruesome, that his member was eaten by animals. It had apparently, to him, obviously been chewed on. So, animals. Howell County Chief Deputy Don Basinger and Howell County Coroner Lonnie Pruitt were first to arrive on scene. They were unsure if the body lay in Howell County or Douglas County. The location would determine whose case it was, although either way the Missouri State Highway Patrol would take charge of the investigation. Looking back, the patrol did a poor job, according to one investigator who reviewed the murder as a cold case. Quote, "The big problem with this case is that nobody did anything about it initially." That's been something of the past with the patrol. And I think the same person was in charge of it at the same time. Interesting. A cold case usually gets solved when the investigators do a hell of a job from the get-go and then technology catches up later. That didn't happen here, he said. Little investigation was done quickly by the Highway Patrol. Quote, "If I were them, I would be less than proud of the job done." Others dispute that the case was mishandled, arguing that the investigation was difficult because more than a few people wanted Ronnie Johnson dead. Roldan Turner in 2020 retired from the Ozark Police Department, where he worked for 23 years. When the body was found, a forest ranger was called to determine which county it was in. She concluded it was about 2/10 of a mile into Douglas County. Basinger, chief deputy in Howell County at the time, told the West Plains Quill he actually was relieved that it wasn't his case because Howell County Sheriff Jay Henry was in the hospital recovering from heart surgery. Highway Patrol troopers from nearby Willow Springs were there, as was Douglas County Sheriff Roldan W. Turner. Turner, then 34, had been elected sheriff around 5.5 months prior. It was his first paid law enforcement job and his first murder case. "Back in those days, our department was small. It was me and one deputy," he told the newsletter. "We relied on the Highway Patrol extensively for cases like this." And we've seen that back then the Highway Patrol really dropped the ball, so I don't know if that blame can be placed on the new sheriff or solely on the Missouri Highway Patrol. Only a small amount of blood was found near the body. There were no clothes and none of the hands and feet. Similarly, there was no bullet, no shell casing, no weapon. So obviously it had been done somewhere else. A nearby pond was drained in search of evidence and nothing was found. Well, I think that was a waste of resources and time to do that. But whatever. Sergeant Carl Watson with the patrol said at the time that someone went through great lengths to make identification difficult. "Once you remove the teeth, hands, and feet, there's not much to go on," he told the media. Watson wrote in a report the, quote, "body appeared to have been carried to this location from Forestry Road 744. In addition to the dismemberment, Martin told the newsletter something else made identification difficult. The coroner had put powder on the body to slow decomposition. This is a standard practice. Unknowingly, though, that powder covered up faded tattoos. Initially, investigators said it was not Johnson's body, despite the fact that he had been missing since April 2nd, more than 3 weeks. Law enforcement made this error because they relied on an initial autopsy by Dr. Mary Case, the St. Louis medical examiner. Case at first concluded the body was too small to be that of Johnson's, who was 6'2" and 225 pounds. Johnson also had tattoos, and Case found none. The Douglas County coroner called Case and asked her to look closer at the body for a tattoo on a shoulder that said Rochelle. Rochelle was Johnson's 6-year-old daughter. This time, case found it. Rochelle Johnson is now 39. She has moved from her hometown where she graduated from West Plains High in the year 2000. West Plains is filled with bad memories, she said. She is married with 2 children and asked that her married name not be used in the story out of concern for the safety of her and her family. Understandable. Many of those interviewed for these stories on Johnson's murder expressed concern that even after all these years, talking to a reporter or to law enforcement could be dangerous. Not only is she worried about retaliation, she also has lived a life where too many people have pointed and whispered, stating, "That's the girl whose daddy was murdered." I remember they tried to keep it from me, she said. I was taking a walk with my mother when a woman from church named Mrs. Ford walked up crying and stated, "I'm so sorry." Rochelle Johnson's fondest memory of her father is when just the 2 of them went swimming at a public pool in West Plains. Rochelle will not let go of her father's death, even though many others have. She believes there are people still alive who know what happened. There's just this code, she said. Someone knows the details. Someone knows the story, the why. She is ready for whatever truth she might resurrect, no matter if it involves kin. She demands an accounting of what law enforcement did or did not do in finding the person who shot her father. She asked without success from the Missouri State Highway Patrol to open its files to her. The newsletter paid to obtain redacted copies of the patrol's 102-page investigative file on the murder. The paper made the request under the state's open records law. The paper, as promised, shared those copies with Rochelle Johnson. Rochelle was a first grader at West Plains Elementary when her father was killed. Since then, she has learned some unvarnished truths about him. He sold marijuana, she said. He served time in prison for that, August 27, 1982 to April 29, 1986. She knows that her father cheated on her mother and had an out-of-wedlock son. There is speculation that he was snitching, she said. It's possible, she says, her father was providing information to law enforcement and drug dealers found out. Perhaps his body was carved up to send some gruesome message to those thinking about cooperating with the police. Peter Galbraith, a name we have not seen yet. That man is Rochelle's grandfather, her maternal grandfather, so her mother's dad. Let's talk a little about him. Peter Galbraith was a barber with a shop on the West Plains town square and later in a small building in the backyard of his Texas Street home. He was a Mason, an Army veteran, a member of Calvary Baptist Church. He graduated from Barber College in Kansas City and soon married Lucille Gannon in 1958. They honeymooned at Niagara Falls. Seems nice. They lost a daughter at birth and adopted an infant girl who would become Rochelle's mother. The 2 families lived a few houses from each other in West Plains. Quote, "He was the most calm and patient man you would ever meet," Rochelle said of Galbraith, her maternal grandfather. "He never raised his voice. He was a religious man. He had lots of friends, very easy to laugh, a great sense of humor, a really kind person." End quote. Her grandfather knew many people, including judges, lawyers, and politicians. Yet, Rochelle believes to this day that he died in 2000 at the age of 85, keeping the Ozark Code of Silence about her father's murder. "I am sure he was involved," she said. "The funny, ironic thing is that my grandfather was the last person to see him alive, the last person with him, and his vehicle was never searched. His home was never searched. To me, that's awfully fishy." End quote. The account Galbraith offered in 1989, which was recounted by local newspapers, including the one I've gotten this information from, is that Galbraith and Ronnie Johnson, his son-in-law, went to look for, quote, turkey signs in the National Forest near Highway P on Sunday, April 2nd, 1989. They were on their way home, Galbraith told law enforcement, when Johnson asked to be let out of the truck at what was the Texaco gas station and Snappy Mart at Highway 14 and 63rd north of West Plains. That is now a Phillips 66 station. According to Galbraith, Johnson said that he saw a man at the truck stop and he needed to talk to him. Back in 1989, Ronnie Johnson's father-in-law told police that he dropped him off at a service station at that location after Johnson said he saw someone that he wanted to talk to and would find his own way home. Johnson's daughter, now 39, doesn't believe that story at all. Weeks later, Johnson's body was found in the woods. Ronnie Johnson backed down to no one. He was the second oldest of 4 sons who grew up fast and rough when their father was killed by a driver while walking home on Highway 63 near Cabell in 1978. Some in West Plains suspect that killing was no accident either, but that's another Ozark story. Ronnie was 16, his father 41. His mother remarried quickly. She wed her husband's brother, Thurlow Johnson. Ugh. I don't care if they're not actually blood related, that's still freaking gross. None of the Johnson boys finished high school. They all worked. Ronnie made it through 9th grade. He was working at a sawmill near the time of his death. Quote, "If Dad would have still been alive, he would have made sure we stayed in school," end quote, said brother Curtis Johnson, 56, who still lives in West Plains. Their father was a meat cutter who was born in West Plains, moved to Kansas City, and returned to his hometown to escape big city crime. Ugh. Trying to escape crime and then he gets run over. That's awful. He was a very strict man, Curtis Johnson said. Dad did not ask you twice, he told you once. I mean, that's pretty common back then. Curtis and his brothers believed that Galbraith, the father-in-law, was involved in Ronnie Johnson's murder. They made that clear to investigators early on, the day Ronnie Johnson was reported missing. Rochelle Johnson said her father's side of the family has always believed her grandfather was involved. She recalled her father's funeral service. Galbraith attended with police protection and left the service early in the company of officers. Rochelle Johnson said that for years after the murder, her mother did not allow her to see her father's side of the family. Gary Johnson was the brother closest in age to Ronnie. He pushed hardest for the truth. The brothers said Ronnie was in an unhappy marriage and did not get along with Galbraith, his father-in-law. Eddie Johnson said Galbraith had put away some money, and the last thing he wanted was for it to end up in the hands of Ronnie, who backed down to no one. Eddie Johnson told the newsletter he thinks too much time has passed for the truth to ever be known. I would really like to know who done it. All these years later, it still torments me. I am never probably going to ever know the truth about it. You really don't let it go. But I have 7 grandchildren, and I really don't want to sit around and be a grumpy old man thinking about the past. Rochelle Johnson shared 2 stories with the newsletter that she had heard from her mother, who is still alive, and her maternal grandmother, who died in 1992. Law enforcement did not hear these 2 stories at the time of her father's death. First, she said the night before her father disappeared in 1989, Galbraith had called her father at home to ask if he wanted to go look for signs of turkeys the next morning. My dad had never went with my grandfather hunting or looking for turkey signs. They were not enemies per se, but they were not close, she stated. Her father agreed, and when he got off the phone, he turned to his wife and asked, quote, "Is your dad going to kill me?" End quote. The second story Rochelle Johnson said is that when her grandfather, Galbraith, got home after looking for turkey signs, he asked his wife to wash his clothes because they had blood on them. Rochelle Johnson told the newsletter that at the time her grandfather knew Ronnie Johnson was cheating on his wife, his Galbraith's daughter. Rochelle Johnson also said both of her maternal grandparents knew from friends that Ronnie Johnson was selling marijuana again. The newsletter spoke to Rochelle Johnson's mother over the phone. She was 17 when she and Ronnie Johnson first got married. Today, she is 56, remarried, and close to daughter Rochelle. She did not want her name to be used, although she agreed that the paper could run a 33-year-old photo of her, Ronnie, and Rochelle. That's the one earlier. I'll go ahead and put it up here again. Yes, she said, Ronnie asked her that night if her father, Peter, planned to kill him. She told him no and said, "Why would he want to kill you?" I thought it was a silly thing to say, so I kind of laughed about it. Then I got to thinking, what has Ronnie done to have somebody want to kill him? She was asked by the newsletter if she thinks Galbraith, her father, was involved in Ronnie's 1989 murder. Her response was, "Anything is possible. My dad was a hush-hush kind of person. He would not tell anybody anything. It is possible, but I don't think so." Ronnie Johnson is buried in a family cemetery in rural Howell County. After that first interview, Ronnie Johnson's former wife declined to speak to the newsletter again. Both Johnson brothers told the newsletter that Johnson's wife and her father were instrumental in sending Ronnie Johnson to prison in August of 1982 for a parole violation. According to documents obtained by the newsletter, Ronnie Johnson was convicted for stealing a rifle from a man in 1981 and placed on parole. So yeah, he did a lot of bad things. Rochelle Johnson told the newsletter that her entire life her mother had told her that Ronnie Johnson's parole violation was for having a firearm and for forging his wife's signature. The forgery, Rochelle Johnson said, came about while Ronnie Johnson was trying to access money he was awarded in an insurance settlement. He'd been injured while riding a motorcycle, and the settlement money was placed in his wife's bank account because he did not have one. She would not give him the money. Oh, that's shitty. So it's his money. She wouldn't give him the money, so he forged her signature to get his money, and then her and her dad reported him for forging the signature, which then put him back in jail. Wow. My mother had also told me that my grandfather encouraged her to press charges, knowing it would send Ronnie back to prison. That's what happened. Ronnie Johnson went to prison for 3 years and 8 months. His wife divorced him while he was incarcerated. Johnson was released in 1986, and then the two remarried. Tumultuous relationship. According to the brother Eddie Johnson, the only reason Ronnie got back with her was so he could see his kid. My thoughts and feelings, your thoughts and feelings, put them in the comments. I'd love to read them. From what I've read, everything is pointing towards the grandfather. He is dead. He died in the year, I think, 2000. Obviously, if he did it, there's no justice that can be had. And at this point, he's passed. His wife passed in like 92. There's no one left to kind of give that information to be like, you know what, he's dead. Yeah, he did it. He was avenging his child that made bad decisions and chose someone that she shouldn't have been with, clearly. Especially them getting back together. I don't care if he did it so he could see his child. That mistake, that choice, cost him his life. If he hadn't have gotten back with her and he would have moved on and had a child with somebody else, which clearly he did have a child with somebody else, he wouldn't have ended up on the other side of that gun. I don't think he would have. I think he may have made other mistakes and probably ended up on the other side of one eventually, maybe, but that's just guessing. There's a lot of flaws in this. From what I've seen, though, that time frame, the Missouri State Highway Patrol really kept dropping the ball. So I don't understand why the Missouri State Highway Patrol back in the late 80s had so many issues with murder cases that they were not solving, that they weren't trying to solve. And at this point, we've seen several. And they're from that time frame. And that it really makes me angry that because of people not doing their job right, not caring about victims, not caring about coming up with an answer because the person made bad decisions in their life, or the person, it's going to be too difficult, or, oh, we better be hushed up because this person knows somebody. Remember, Grandpa knew politicians and lawyers and judges and stuff. So the intimidation factor is also there. And it makes me angry that that particular group of men and women, I don't know if there were women back then in the Missouri State Highway Patrol, but if there were, that group of people were clearly easily intimidated, or they were run by someone who was easily intimidated. And I don't know, I'm very much the mindset of like a vigilante. Like, save those who can be saved. Like, do your best. Always do your best. Try to be the better person. And the more I live life, the more I learn. I'm a minority in that. There's so many people who don't care about the truth, who don't care about getting to the bottom of things. I'm spitting everywhere. Who don't care about bringing closure to families because those families have had run-ins with the law before. Like, who cares? They're still humans. They're still people. They still deserve closure. And what about this little girl who's lived her entire life without that closure? She didn't do anything wrong. And he died at the age of 26. So young. Ridiculously young. And obviously he made a lot of bad decisions. But it sounds like he was kind of destined for bad decisions after his father passed away. The butterfly effect. Every action has a reaction. Because you've done something here, it can cause something there. Because you made this choice to be with this person, it can cause issues with your children growing up. Because you made this choice over here, it can cause problems over there. People don't think about that, though. People are so selfish, and they don't think about the cause and effect of their own decisions. And if people were more mindful and cared more and really wanted to get down to the actual answers, they would. I 100% believe they would. 100%. I believe that they could have searched that man's truck at the bare minimum. Like, you telling me that you couldn't search his truck? That you didn't go and search his house? That you didn't question him or question his wife? Ask like, hey, did your husband come home with blood on his shirt? Oh, he did? And you washed it? Well, you're an accessory to murder. Now I'll get off my soapbox. I'll stop my rant. I really, really hope that detectives do a much better job nowadays. I really hope that there's more care and compassion and want to actually find the killers and want to find the answers nowadays. Because clearly, Missouri in the late 80s was not it. And I really hope that this girl, this now woman, gets the answers she longs for, no matter what they are. I hope she gets her answers. If you have any comments or questions or suggestions, especially suggestions, go ahead and put them in the comment section. I would love to read them. If you haven't already, please subscribe. It means a lot to me. I really would like to get to 1,000 subscribers. Right now, I know that seems kind of far-fetched and out of left field, but I would really like to get to 1,000 subscribers. Share this if you haven't shared it. If you'd like to, I would appreciate that. All right. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.